Learn Japanese history. We are your navigators.
Welcome. In this deep dive, we're going to explore a really foundational period if you're just starting with Japanese history.
That's right, we're talking about the establishment of the Kamakura Bakufu, the shogunate.
Exactly. And understanding this, it's key because it sets the stage for so much of what comes later. Think of it as the bedrock for understanding samurai rule.
It really is a major turning point, isn't it? A
Yeah.
whole new system of government taking shape.
Absolutely. And to really get it, we have to look at the pretty turbulent times right before it, specifically the Genpei War. That kicked off around 1180.
The Genpei War. Okay, so what was the spark? What led to this big conflict?
Well, at its heart, there was this growing frustration, with the power held by Taira no Kiyomori.
Ah, Kiyomori. He'd become incredibly powerful.
Immensely so. He even managed to put his own grandson, Emperor Entoku, on the throne. That kind of concentration of power in one clan, the Taira. Well, it didn't sit well with others.
Like the Minamoto clan, I assume.
Precisely. So, Prince Majihito, he was a son of the retired Emperor Go-Shirakawa. He teamed up with Minamoto no Yorimasa. They basically said enough is enough and took up arms against the Taira.
And that was the trigger. But it wasn't just them, right? It spread.
Oh, absolutely. Their uprising was like a signal flare. Across Japan, other samurai groups who were also unhappy with Taira rule saw their chance and joined in.
So it became a much wider resistance.
Yeah, you had uprisings popping up in different regions, like Minamoto no Yoritomo, who we'll talk a lot about. He started his movement in Izu.
And wasn't there Minamoto no Yoshinaka in Shinano too?
Exactly. So you see, it wasn't just one isolated rebellion. It was this widespread wave of opposition. That's really important for understanding how the Minamoto eventually came out on top.
Okay, so that sets the scene. Now, how did Yoritomo actually start building the Bakufu itself? He's in the eastern provinces. What was special about that area?
That's a great question. The eastern provinces, they had this long history of, let's say, not exactly loving central authority from Kyoto.
A bit rebellious.
You could say that. The samurai there were often real pioneers. They were clearing uncultivated land, setting up horse ranches, super important for cavalry, of course, and farming on manors.
But they faced problems.
Yeah, they often clashed with the provincial governors sent from the capital or the lords running the manors, issues over taxes, labor duties. There was definitely friction. They had a strong sense of independence.
So maybe they were looking for a leader who, understood their situation.
Exactly. Yoritomo tapped into that perfectly. When he launched his uprising, he managed to bring these fiercely independent Eastern samurai together remarkably quickly.
How quickly are we talking?
Within about 2 months, maybe a bit more, he'd secured control over the southern Kanto region. It was pretty swift.
Wow. Okay, so Yoritomo's consolidating in the east. What are the Taira doing? How did they react?
Well, initially the Taira actually moved the capital. They shifted it to Fukuhara, which is near modern-day Kobe.
Why there?
It seems partly strategic, maybe to better handle the rebellions spreading out, but then they hit a major snag. They lost a key battle, the Battle of Fujikawa. After that defeat, they decided, okay, maybe Fukuhara wasn't the best idea, and they moved the capital back to Kyoto, trying to consolidate power around the traditional center.
Meanwhile, Yoritomo picks Kamakura for his base. Why Kamakura specifically?
Kamakura was a smart choice. For one, it's naturally defensible. You've got mountains on 3 sides and the sea on the 4th. Pretty hard to attack.
Good geography. Anything else?
Yes, there was a historical connection, too. His father, Minamoto no Yoshitomo, had actually used Kamakura as his base before, so it was strategic, but also had this symbolic weight, reclaiming family ground in a way.
Right, practical and symbolic. Clever.
Yeah.
So he's got Kamakura, he's got the Kanto region. How does
Yeah.
he go from regional power to, setting up a national system?
It was a mix of military campaigning and some pretty shrewd politics. A key moment was in 1183. Yoritomo negotiated with the imperial court in Kyoto.
What did he get?
He basically got official recognition of his control over the eastern provinces. That legitimacy, getting the court's stamp of approval, even if they didn't have much choice, was really important.
And he started putting his own people in charge out there.
Exactly. He established Shido. Think of them as military land stewards, his loyal guys on the ground in the eastern territories.
What was their official job?
Officially, they were supposed to help rebuild the East after the fighting and, crucially, make sure tax revenues got collected for the court. But of course, their primary loyalty was to Yoritomo.
So they gave him direct control and an economic base.
Smart. Very smart. It formed a key part of his financial strength.
Well, Yoritomo's building this up. What's happening with the Taira? You mentioned they moved back to Kyoto.
Things were going downhill for them. Taira no Kiyomori's death was a huge blow, obviously. Their leadership was weakened.
Wasn't there a famine around then, too?
Yes, a major famine hit, which really hurt their ability to field armies and just generally maintain control. Things got pretty desperate.
So what did they do?
They ended up fleeing westward, retreating from Kyoto, and taking the young Emperor Ontoku with them.
Wow, taking the emperor with them. That sounds like a last-ditch effort. How did Yoritomo finally defeat them?
He played it strategically. He sent units of his eastern samurai out across different regions to project his power. But the main pursuit of the Taira forces was led by his brothers.
Moriori and Yoshitsune, right, the famous one.
That's the one. Noriori and Yoshitsune chased the Taira relentlessly westward. The final showdown was a naval battle.
Tennoura!
The Battle of Dannoura in 1185 off the coast of Nagato province. It was a total disaster for the Taira. The clan was essentially annihilated.
And with that, Yoritomo had military dominance.
Pretty much nationwide, yeah. The main military opposition was gone.
Okay, so the fighting's largely over. But military control isn't the same as a stable government. How did he build the actual Bakufu, the political structure?
Right. After Dannoura, he again negotiated with the imperial court. This time, he got control over all the lands that had belonged to the Taira, which were confiscated.
Wow, that must have been a lot of land.
It was expensive. This collection of lands was called the Haikminkanryo. Added to what Yoritomo already controlled, it formed the Kanto Goryo, his personal domain, essentially. Huge economic power.
And he didn't stop there, did he? He got involved in the existing imperial system, too.
He did. He looked at what the Taira had done previously and requested something similar. Chigokoku.
Which means?
Control over provincial governorships. The court granted him authority over 4 provinces, sometimes called the Kanto Chiyokoku or Kanto Gobunkoku.
So more income, more administrative control within those specific areas.
Exactly, building up his financial and administrative muscle.
Okay, so he's got land, money, recognition. Now, how did he actually run things? What were the nuts and bolts, the institutions he created?
This is where you really see the new government taking shape. He set up some key administrative and judicial bodies in Kamakura. First, the Kumanjo.
Kumanjo.
Yeah, it later became known as the Mandakoro, the administrative board. Its job was basically managing all those manors and public lands he controlled, the source of his wealth.
Okay, so that handles the administration and finances. What about law and order, especially among his own samurai followers?
For that, he established the Manchujo, the Board of Inquiry. This was specifically for handling legal cases, disputes, trials involving his direct retainers, his gokinin.
Got to keep your own house in order.
Absolutely. Resolving disputes among his warriors was crucial for maintaining loyalty and stability.
Who did he get to run these new boards? His samurai commanders?
Interestingly, no. He actually brought in experienced administrators, but they were lower-ranking court officials from Kyoto.
From Kyoto, not his eastern samurai.
Right. Ueno Hiromoto became the head, the Bedo, of the Kumanjo Mandakoro, and Mitsuyoshi Yasunobu headed up the Manchujo. These guys knew the existing legal and administrative systems inside out.
Huh. So he's combining the military power of his eastern warriors with the bureaucratic know-how from the capital.
Precisely. It was a really clever synthesis. He leveraged the raw power of the samurai and the established authority and, frankly, the administrative skills of the imperial court system. That combination is what really solidified the Bakufu's foundations.
It wasn't just a military camp then, it was a proper government emerging.
Definitely. And Kamakura itself started to look like a capital city. Yoritomo started planning the city layout.
How so?
He centered it around the Tsurugaoka Hachimangu Shrine, which was very important, and laid out this major road, the Wakamiya Oji, running south from it, giving the city a real focal point.
And Kamakura kept growing after Yoritomo, right?
Oh, yes. Especially under the Hojo regents, like Hojo Yasutoki, they actually brought in more administrative systems, modeling them on Kyoto's. This really helped Kamakura blossom into the undisputed center of the eastern provinces. It became the political and cultural heart for the samurai class.
It's amazing to think about what it must have been like. Is archaeology telling us anything new about medieval Kamakura?
It really is. Excavations are turning up some fascinating stuff. For example, that main road, Wakamiya Oji, turns out it was incredibly wide.
Wider than you'd expect.
Yeah, suggesting it wasn't just for traffic. Maybe it served defensive purposes like a fire break or for controlling crowds. Disaster prevention, as you might say.
Interesting. What else?
They found these little wooden tags, mokon, in the drainage ditches along the road. And some of them have the names of Gokunin Yoritomo's retainers written on them.
Seriously, what does that mean?
It strongly suggests the Gokunin themselves were involved in the construction work, maybe building the earthen walls, the suiji that line the avenue, direct evidence of their contribution to building the city.
That's incredible. Tangible proof.
Isn't it? We're also getting a better picture of the market areas down near the sea and how ordinary samurai and commoners actually lived, the layout of their houses along the main streets and smaller alleys. It paints a much more vivid picture.
And getting in and out of Kamakura, surrounded by mountains.
Right, they created these kiridoshi. They literally cut passes through the hills.
For roads.
Yes, but they also served as defensive choke points. And interestingly, the hillsides near these passes are full of these cave tombs called yagura. Some areas around the kiridoshi even became little commercial spots over time.
So even the access routes were multi-purpose. What about connecting Kamakura to the rest of its territory, the Gokunin scattered across the east?
That's where the Kamakura Kaido comes in. It wasn't just one road, but a network of roads, generally flatter routes, linking Kamakura with the Gokunin domain.
And that name still exists.
Yeah, you still find place names with Kamakura Kaido today. Shows how important it was for communication, moving goods, troops if necessary.
And Kamakura is on the coast. Ports must have been vital.
Absolutely critical. There was Wakainetsu right near the main commercial area facing the open sea, and then Mutsuritsu on the Tokyo Bay side, which acted as Kamakura's sort of outer harbor.
What came through the ports?
All sorts of things. Annual taxes, rice, other goods from across the regions the Bakufu controlled. They all flowed into Kamakura via these ports. They were the economic lifelines.
So Yoritomo sets all this up.
Yeah.
But the system kept evolving after him, especially under the Hojo regions you mentioned.
It definitely did. Hojo Yasutoki, even before he officially became shogun himself, though the real power was with the region, he established the Hyujoshu.
Hyujoshu, what was that?
It was a council of state made up of the regent Yasutoki and other powerful Gokunin. They met to discuss and decide on important political issues and legal cases. It was another step in formalizing the government.
And the Hojo just kept tightening their grip, didn't they?
Pretty much. Yasutoki also created the position of Rensho, a co-signer, basically an assistant regent. And importantly, he appointed another Hojo to that role. That really marks the point where Hojo regent rule was cemented.
Okay, and then came the Gosaibai Shikimoku. That sounds important. A legal code.
Hugely important. It was issued in 1232. Sometimes called the Joi Shikimoku. It's a 51-article code, and you can really think of it as the first comprehensive legal code for the samurai. By the samurai, in a way.
What was it based on? Did they just make it up?
No. It drew heavily on the existing customs, the sort of warrior morality and common practices that had developed within samurai society, and also on the legal precedents, the decisions made by the Bakufu going all the way back to Yoritomo's time.
So what was its main purpose?
Primarily, it aimed to provide clear standards for resolving disputes, especially land disputes, which were constantly cropping up among the samurai. It also clearly defined the powers and duties of the shugo, the provincial military governors, and the hito, those land stewards we talked about.
So it was the law of the land for the samurai class.
Well, initially, its direct power was mostly limited to the areas and people under the Bakufu's direct control.
So not everywhere.
Not immediately. In areas still dominated by the imperial court or the old manor lords, Kyoto law and local manor rules still applied. But as the Bakufu's power grew and spread, so did the influence of the Gosaibai Shikimoku. It gradually became more widely applied and had a really significant impact on Japanese law in later centuries. It set a major precedent.
It sounds like Yasutoki was a really key figure in shaping the Bakufu after Yoritomo. Did his successors follow his lead?
Yes, largely. His grandson, Hojo Tokiori, who also served as regent, continued many of Yasutoki's policies. He wanted to make legal processes fairer and faster, so he set up the Hikitsukeshu.
Another board?
Yeah, a board of appeal, basically to help speed up trials and ensure fairness. Tokiori was also pretty ruthless in putting down any potential rivals within the Hojo clan itself, consolidating their power even further.
And wasn't there a change in who the actual shogun was around this time?
Yes, that was significant too. Up until then, the shoguns had been from the Fujiwara family, distantly related to Yoritomo. But under Tokiori, they replaced the Fujiwara shogun with an imperial prince, Prince Munetaka.
An imperial prince as shogun.
It sounds like it gives the shogunate more prestige, but really it made the shogun even more of a figurehead. The Hojo regions held all the real power. It basically signaled a further strengthening of the Hojo's, well, dictatorial control.
Okay, wow. We've covered a massive amount of ground there, from the initial conflict to a fully formed government with its own legal code. Can we just quickly recap the main steps for everyone listening?
Sure. So you start with the chaos of the Genpei War. Out of that, Minamoto no Yoritomo rises, unifying the Eastern samurai. He chooses Kamakura, a really defensible spot, as his base.
Then he starts building the actual government.
Right. He creates key institutions like the Mandokoro for administration and the Manchujo for legal matters, crucially bringing in experts from Kyoto to help run them. He secures land and resources, the Haikemin Kenryo and Jigyokoku.
And finally, the legal framework.
Exactly. The Goseibai Shikimoku, emerging under Hojo Yasutoki, provides that distinct legal code for the samurai class, solidifying the Bakufu's unique identity.
So this whole period, it's really the dawn of proper samurai rule in Japan, isn't it?
Absolutely. The founding of the Conqueror Bakufu is pivotal. It marks this fundamental shift of power away from the imperial court and towards the warrior class. And the way it was structured, the institutions, the laws, they cast a very long shadow over Japanese history.
A truly transformative period. Okay, so to leave you with something to think about as you delve deeper into Japanese history.
Consider this. How did that unique blend, the military might from the East, the samurai power, combined with the administrative traditions and cultural weight of the Kyoto court, how did that mix truly shape the Kamakura Bakufu's character?
And maybe think about the longer-term effects. What did this new political order, this warrior government, mean for the relationship, the ongoing push and pull between the samurai and the imperial court down the line? It's a fascinating dynamic to keep exploring.